Do you want to improve your sight reading in piano so that when you pick up a new piece of music, you're able to read it a little faster than before? If so, this video is for you. This video is going to come in useful for you if you're sight reading new music for the first time, if you want to sight read faster, or if you're preparing to take an exam and you're going to have to sight read during the exam. I'm going to share with you my 5 tips that have helped me and my students sight read more effectively. And then after that, I will share with you my unique 3-step formula for how to practice sight reading better. Before I get into the 5 tips, I'm going to briefly explain what sight reading is. So sight reading is when we play through new music for the first time and we're looking for 100% accuracy. This is usually used in the context of preparing for an exam, but it can also just be you're trying to play a song for somebody that you've never played before. You need to know that your brain learns by repetition. So if you're practicing a song that you already know, you're practicing honing the song and you're practicing memorizing the song, but you're practicing that specific song. You're not actually practicing sight reading. In order to practice sight reading, you have to continually do sight reading. So you have to be looking at new music continually. So if you're like, well, that's fine, Tia, but I don't have enough new music to do that with, I've got you covered. So I'll leave my Amazon affiliate links in the description with some suggestions for easy sight reading. And in the next video that I make, I'm actually going to review these books. So if you want to wait to purchase them until you can see what's in them, go for it. That'll be in the next video. So stick around for that one. In a nutshell, if you want to learn how to play things well on the first shot, you need to be continually playing new things on the first shot. Sort of on the first shot. I'll explain more on that when I explain the formula that I use to train students to sight read. So, if your goal in this part of your journey in piano is to learn to sight read better, you're going to have to devote special time to it. Specifically devote maybe 5 minutes to sight reading every time that you practice. And after a while, you should notice that your sight reading is getting easier and more accurate, especially if you use the formula that I tell you about. With that said, let's get into the tips. Now, I recommend that you choose 1 or 2 tips for this week and choose the one that you think would benefit you the most. Then when you've kind of mastered that tip, then come back and try another one. But if you try all 5, it'll be overwhelming. So definitely just pick 1 or 2 and work on those. Tip 1, the most important tip, is to choose music that's much easier than what you already play. Right away, you'll be able to recognize most of the elements in that piece of music so that you'll be able to start and you'll be able to get to the end, and you might have a few mistakes, but you're familiar with the concepts and they're kind of easier to execute. This is important because whenever you learn, you are training your brain, and your brain likes positive feedback and is very sensitive to negative feedback. So if you play music that's at your level or harder than your level, the first time you play through, you might make a lot of mistakes, or you might feel like it's way too much information and you will struggle to get 100% accuracy on that. And the struggle will be greater than the reward of getting to the end of the line of music because you'll feel overwhelmed. Now, this may not apply to everyone, but it's been my experience as a teacher and as a pianist that it's better to play easier rather than to feel overwhelmed with too much information. It also slows you down and holds you back from learning because you feel overwhelmed or frustrated, or you're just not getting enough progress for the effort that you feel like you're putting in. On the other hand, if you choose music that's easier than what you can currently do, you're immediately going to get positive reinforcement because you'll start, you might have a couple mistakes, a few mistakes, but then when you get to the end, you'll feel like, okay, I actually did pretty good. I understand everything that was in front of me and I was able to do it. And that is better positive reinforcement for your brain. Your brain loves reaching goals. So you want to give it short, simple goals to reach at first and increase the difficulty incrementally. Tip 2, the second most important tip with sight reading, is to play very, very slowly. Much slower than you think you need to. One thing that I discovered when I was doing practice sessions on this channel, I'll link that playlist in the cards in the description. But I discovered that when I thought I was playing slowly, when I went to edit that part of the footage, it was like, oh, I wasn't actually playing much slower at all. And so it made me more aware of my actual speed. And it also explained to me why sometimes I say to my students, play slower, and it sounds to me like they're playing at the same speed. Well, to them it feels slower, because my perception of me was if I'm playing slower. But in actuality, the speed is almost the same, maybe slightly different. You want to take it super, super slow, slow enough that you almost feel bored. But in that boredom, you want to rein in all your focus and be specific about each note that you're playing. So you get bored, but don't let your mind wander. Keep it on the music. Playing super slowly like that is going to serve two purposes. The most immediate purpose is that the slower you play, the more time you have to find the next thing. So that means the more accurate you're going to play, because you have enough time to analyze it and figure it out. Whereas when you're playing fast, you have to rush through, you're not thinking as much about what you're playing. The second benefit is more long-term, and this is when you sight read very, very slowly over time, you develop the habit of when I sight read, I play slowly. Your brain collects that. And then if you're going to an exam, when you go to play your sight reading at the exam, you will probably automatically play slower. And playing too fast is a big problem for students who take exams because it's a stressful situation. So the back of our brain lights up and we're in fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. And most likely we're either going to freeze. If you freeze during an exam, breathe and release. Breathe and release. When you become aware of your breathing, you put yourself back in the present. I think it's, which nervous system is that? It's the autonomic nervous system, or it's the other one. Anyways, if you freeze, you can recover by just like taking a moment and being aware. But if you're in flight mode, what's going to happen is you'll go to play something and you'll be playing way too fast. You'll get halfway through the song and you'll be like, I don't even know where I am, because your brain will like suddenly reboot itself. And then you'll become aware, and this transition from muscle memory, because you're playing really fast and you're stressed out, to being aware of what you're playing, that is always a terrible transition. You make a bunch of mistakes. I've experienced this several times in exams. So if you make a habit of sight reading very, very slowly, what'll end up happening is in the sight reading portion of your exam, you'll be able to slow down and relax a little more because you've already trained to slow and relax. Tip 3 is about when you're sure you're about to make a mistake. So when you're sight reading and you're not sure of what's coming next, or you're sure you're about to get it wrong, there are two ways to handle it. I've heard both ways from different teachers who are both great teachers, but one way works for me and one way doesn't. Now I'm going to share both ways with you so that you have all the information and you can make the best decision for you, or you can test them both out and you can see what works for you. So one way to handle not sure what comes next is you're going to prioritize rhythm over everything else. So you'll fudge the notes, you'll give it your best guess on the notes, but you'll keep your rhythm accurate. And this could be good if you already have a strong sense of rhythm. So in this case, we prioritize rhythm and we sacrifice notes. What I recommend for my students to do, and what I do when I sight read, is if I'm not sure what's coming next, I will pause, take a moment to figure it out, and then I'll proceed with the correct letters. Generally, this works out very well for me and I make fewer mistakes. Whereas when I try to prioritize rhythm and kind of guess the notes, I end up making a lot of mistakes. And then if I make too many note mistakes, then I get feeling super stressed and my rhythm fails. So my approach is to sacrifice rhythm and prioritize letters. Either way, you have to sacrifice something. So try both ways out and see what works for you. Now, as you improve at sight reading, you will eventually start slowly enough, you'll have enough time to find what you need to play next, or you'll just be fluent enough at reading that you can read ahead. But that expertise comes with time. So at first, you must sacrifice. Later, you won't need to, but for now, figure out your sacrifice. Tip 4 is to keep your movements as efficient as possible. And I'm going to show you on the screen what I mean. There are 5 different ways that you can improve your efficiency just by how you move your fingers. So the first way is to keep your fingers close to the keys like this. Not like this. The reason it's more efficient is because if you stay close to the keys, you don't lose your spot. But if you raise up super high, and especially if you're new to piano, you might set your hands off on the wrong keys, or it'll take you a minute to find where you need to be. And if you have a song where you're starting to build speed, lifting off really high like that is definitely not going to build your speed. It's going to slow you down. The second way is you're going to want to keep your thumbs resting on the keys, like this, and not like this. Because the little bit of time it takes to bring your thumbs back up onto the keys will also slow you down. The other problem is you're not going to be using all of your hand muscles if your thumb is way down here. You want your thumb up here, anchoring your hands, and that will put you in ultimate alignment, and as you play, as you practice, your hand will get stronger. The third way is to use the suggested fingering in your sight reading pieces. If there's no fingering, take extra time when you first sight read and figure out what fingers will you need. Where will you need to tuck your thumb? Where will you need to cross your fingers over your thumb? The fourth way is to only cross over or tuck when absolutely necessary. Finally, I'll show you this one. If crossing, tucking, or stretching your hand is awkward or uncomfortable, move your whole hand instead. We often try to connect everything to get a smooth sound, but sometimes it's too much of a strain on your hand to try to connect that, so it's just better to move, and move as quickly as you can. Tip 5 will improve your sight reading, but you shouldn't practice it when you're sight reading. You should practice it when you're playing things that you're already relatively familiar with. So tip 5 is trying not to look at your hands and instead focusing on the music, keeping your eyes on the music. This helps you read better because you can focus on the information on the page. And multitasking, in my opinion, is a myth. I've heard this from a few different neuroscience sources, and it makes a lot of sense to me. What we're doing when we're multitasking is we're actually just switching our focus, because your brain can really only focus on one thing at a time. If I hold up my hands here, I can see, and I'm looking at the camera, I can see my hands, but they're super blurry. I'm not actually focused on them. If I focus on my hands, I can sort of see the camera in the background, but it's super blurry. And you'll notice that if you do that too. Look at your hands, look at your computer. You can't actually focus on both and get equal clarity, because in order to focus on one thing, your brain has to zone out the rest. So, when you're switching tasks, when you're looking at the music and then you're looking at your hands, you're switching tasks. And every time that you switch tasks, there's a delay to get back into the previous task. Because you look at the music, you look at your hands to check where you are, you look at the music, oh shoot, where was I in the music? So you have that pause, and a lot of pianists experience this. Train yourself to only look at the music and not look at your hands. Now, how can you do that? Because your white keys all feel the same. Well, if you slide your hand forward so that your fingers are nestled against the black keys, I'll show you on screen what I mean by slide forward, because that can be confusing. If you slide them forward so that they're near the black keys, you'll be able to use the black keys as a guide for where you are. Also, just the more that you practice not looking at your hands, you'll become more familiar with the layout of the piano automatically. Kind of like when you're typing, if you look at the screen instead of your fingers, eventually you just get familiar with where all the letters are on the keyboard. Now, one tip for trying not to look at your hands is to cover them in a light fabric, like a tea towel or a pillowcase. And this is good advice if you're not moving around a lot, because if you're just staying in one place, the tea towel is going to rest on you. But if you're moving around, then it's gonna it's not gonna travel with you, and it's gonna get bunched up, and it's gonna be a little awkward. So yes, try covering your hands with light fabric so that when you look down, there's really no purpose to looking down because you can't see your hands, and that will break your brain's habit of up, down, up, down. But only do it if you're not moving around a lot so that it's not pernickety. So those are the 5 tips. Which one are you going to work on for your sight reading this week? If you want to let me know, share it in the comments. Choose one, make a plan, and practice your sight reading for like 5 minutes every time that you practice. Now here is the formula that helped me sight read better and that I recommend for my students when they're practicing sight reading. Now, traditional sight reading, we only play through a line of music once and we aim for 100% accuracy. But to practice sight reading, it's really hard to only play through once, because usually we're not going to be able to get 100% sight reading accuracy because our sight reading is not there yet. And if you get to the end of the line and your accuracy is poor, and then you just move on to the next thing, you're not learning and you're not training yourself to improve. So this is why I recommend that you play through your sight reading line 3 times. But we're going to be very intentional and thoughtful. And so these are the 3 steps that you're going to take when you sight read a new piece of music. Now, the first time around, before you even play, I want you to sit and analyze the piece of music in front of you. What are your lowest notes? What are your highest notes? In the right hand and in the left hand. And where are you going to find those on the piano? What are your fastest notes and what are your slowest notes? If you analyze that, you'll be able to better differentiate what the rhythm is. You might not be able to hear the rhythm in your head when you're looking at it, like some musicians can do after they read for a long time. But if you can at least go, okay, this is a half note, so I'm going to be holding that bum, bum. And then over here I've got eighth notes, so we're going to go bum, 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 bum. This is also going to help you time your speed better. Do you have any black keys? Are they at the beginning of the line of music, like in the key signature? Or are they on the individual notes? Is there somewhere that you have to move or stretch your hands or change your fingering or cross over or tuck? Lastly, identify any patterns that you recognize. Now, if you don't recognize any patterns, don't worry about it. You're new. It's going to be hard to do that. That's a more advanced skill. Now, think about all this before you play and take your time doing it. I know that in an exam, you're not going to have oodles of time, so you'll have to be quicker with the analysis, but that's what we're working on. You will get faster at analyzing the more that you analyze. But at first, you need lots of time. So be patient with yourself, give yourself as much time as you need, think about all the fingers, think about all the letters, and relax. You will become more efficient at this process the more that you do it, but you're not efficient at it yet. So it's okay that it takes longer, and it's okay that it's harder. So after you analyze that and you're ready, you've got your hands ready, breathe, and then play and start out much slower than you think you need to. Now, I can basically guarantee that you will make mistakes, and that's okay. Mistakes show us where we're weak and what we need to focus on, which is what we'll be doing the second time around. To prepare for the second time you're going to play, I want you to think about the mistakes that you made the first time. But you're not just going to think about, oh, I did this wrong and I did that wrong. Because whenever you approach from a negative angle, it's not as good for your brain as approaching from a positive angle. When you focus on the negative, you're actually more likely to make the mistake if all you're doing is thinking about the mistake. You need to replace what you're thinking about. So, you go, okay, I made this mistake, and I made that mistake, and I made that mistake. Now, then you focus on, to fix this mistake, the thing that I should do here is I need to play, let's say, G with my finger 1 instead of A. So then you think, when I get here, you look at your music and you go, okay, when I get here, I'm going to play G with my finger 1. Then you look at the next mistake and you go, oh, I held that for too long. Then you go, okay, so when I get to this particular note, I'm going to let it go here. And then you have another mistake and you went, that was supposed to be staccato, but I played it smooth. Well, then what you think is, okay, so when I get over to this note, we got to play it staccato, and this is what it's going to feel like. That's the finger I'm going to use, and that's the letter I'm going to play it on. So that you give yourself solutions. Once you know the solutions, you're actually going to be more likely to play those parts correctly with the solution. Then when you've analyzed it again and you've given yourself the solutions for your mistakes, you go to play the second time. Make sure you breathe first and make sure you start super, super slow. Now you might make other mistakes along the way, but those ones don't matter because we have 3 specific goals for this time around. There are 3 things you need to fix. So you're going to try to fix those things and don't worry about the other mistakes that come up. You might not be able to fix every mistake, but see what you can do. And if you fix even one, celebrate that. The third time around, we're not going to focus on mistakes. Unless you had like a lot. If you had like 10 mistakes, okay, well then the third time around, we're going to reassess and you're going to think about solutions and you're going to play again and you're going to try and solve those mistakes. One thing you could consider is if you have that many mistakes, maybe you're not playing slow enough, so slow down even more. But let's say you had a couple mistakes, but you feel pretty good about it. Now when you play the third time around, you're going to look for details. So if there's dynamics, which means soft or loud parts, this is when you want to incorporate your dynamics. If there's a pedal marking, this is when you're going to try to incorporate the pedal. Also, if you are not strong in rhythm and you need to work on your rhythm, this is when you can do that. And if you need to, write the counting directly into the music. Rhythm is something that's tricky in sight reading, and it stops up a lot of students because you're only supposed to sight read once. They'll only sight read once, but they don't really understand the rhythm. And then they move on to the next one, but they don't understand that rhythm, and so they don't end up learning the different rhythms. So if rhythm is hard for you, use step 3, your details section, to work on rhythm instead. Write it all in and count out loud and practice that rhythm. Now once you've gone through these 3 stages, set aside that piece of sight reading and don't read it again, unless you really enjoyed it and you want to learn it. But generally, just set it aside and don't touch it again. Now you might notice you weren't able to get all the letters or all the rhythm or all the details in on those first 3 rounds, and that's okay because you're new to sight reading and this is about incremental improvement. You're not going to get incremental improvement if you don't analyze what you're doing. But as long as you're analyzing what you're doing and you're giving it your best shot to try and solve it the next time around, you will get better and better at your sight reading. But it doesn't have to be perfect by the third time you've played it, and it probably won't be for a bit. Continue to dedicate 5 to 10 minutes of practice whenever you practice to sight reading, and you will find that your ability to read expands gradually. So once again, if you need some extra sight reading material, I'll leave some affiliate links down in the description for the books that I would recommend. And if you want to see a review of those books so that you get an idea of what's inside them, I'll do that in an upcoming video. If you enjoyed this video, or if it brought value to you, please give it a like. If you know anyone else who is also in need of some sight reading advice, please share it with them. If you want to tell me how your sight reading is going, leave it in the comments. And if you would like more of these kinds of instructional videos, subscribe.